Welcome to The Real Life Buyer. Whether you are buying for yourself or your business, here you will find tips, techniques and knowledge to support your journey to buying smart. Interviewing business owners and technical experts to give you information and guidance before parting with your money. Save money, time and get what you want when you want it. Now introducing The Real Life Buyer, Dave Barr.
Hello and welcome to The Real Life Buyer. In this episode, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Nick O'Neill, Managing Director of NTN Bearings UK Limited. Nick and I met the best part of 20 years ago when he was then a sales rep for NTN. Since then, his career has blossomed in the company, with him now being the leader of this high-quality Japanese-owned division. Hello, Nick, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Dave. Thank you, and for the opportunity to discuss. Yeah, I think it's probably been 20 years plus since our paths first crossed. Something
Scary,
like
isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so a few more grey hairs nowadays, I think, from when we first met each other.
Well, it was nice to reminisce the other day and remember how many how many years have gone by and how much older the kids are. There we go.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me just start off with the first question to ease us in. Perhaps you could spend a few minutes telling the listeners about Nick O'Neill, the person, and your impressive career progression in NTN UK.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. So I started my career with NTN Bearings. Well, it was actually 31 years ago. This 24th of July just finished. I started as a internal sales administrator. Previously, I'd worked with a local bearing distributor. But even at this early stage of my working life, I knew I wished to work with a manufacturer and move away from a distributor. I really wanted to try and challenge myself. I left school at the tender age of 15 years and 10 months. With O-levels, I would say they were satisfactory rather than outstanding. And at this time, if you recall, this would probably be around sort of 1985. So in essence, higher education for sixth form was not really appealing to myself. And as universities were not as accessible as we see today, I decided at that particular point to take what was known as a YTS, or a youth training scheme.
I remember it well.
Or youth opportunity scheme, maybe people would recognise it as. And really with a view to letting that be my platform to educate me further. For sure, at the beginning, before I joined NTN, as I've already alluded to, I was working for a local distributor, and this put me into the adult world. And at 15 years, 10 months, because of my tender age, I could not take up this position till I was actually 16 in YTS. So if I then fast forward to July 1989, as I say, I joined NTN as an internal sales administrator. At that time, I was employed and I was part of a team who looked after OEM sales, which were predominantly industrial based. During the next 3 years with NTN, I think I'd shown to my peers and lords and masters a willingness to learn. And I was given an opportunity in 1992 to go back to school to study for mechanical engineering. And at that time was also offered a position in the engineering department as a junior applications engineer. This was really my opportunity I seen, and I grabbed that with both hands. Really, my dream was to become more commercially biased with NTN, but I clearly felt that for me to be successful in that, I needed to have some sort of engineering knowledge and background to support me with where I wanted to go for the future. So when I moved back into where I went into the engineering department, as I say, I went back to school for 5 years. I was very fortunate that NTN trusted me. They gave me day release for 5 years. But I also dedicated 2 evenings per week for those 5 years. And I finished my studies in the summer of 1997, having really gone from first certificate in engineering through ONC to the higher national certificate. And on successful completion of that, and I'm happy to say with mainly merits and distinctions, I was then made applications engineer with NTN. So during my time, when I look back in engineering, there were some fairly pivotal moments for our company. I was tasked with really moving us away from the classic drawing board to implementing the first generic CAD system within NTN UK. And when I look back now, the task of implementing what we really knew at the first throes of this wonderful thing called the internet. So I remember very well the dial-up modem, the eternities it took to connect to this internet, only for it to drop out. But again, we are talking well over 20 years ago now. So to be part, when I look back now, to think that I was part of the first team, that put this into our company here, I look back with very fond memories. And I hope that in 20 years' time, some of our younger people that are here will also have those memories with the next evolution of technology. So as I went through my time in engineering and my progression, I was given more responsibility for customer calculations, etc., bearing selections for various market sectors. And at this time, I also branched out and was given my first opportunity to have some overseas travel for NTN, where I visited our company in the USA. I was given specific training which allied my engineering development in construction industry in particular. This really did at that time give me some newfound self-confidence, as I knew that this was a very good sign that my mentors and peers clearly saw me as somebody that they could develop and nurture within this great company of ours. So I stayed within engineering until 1998, when in the October, for the first time, I dipped my toe into the world of commercial. And I think this day was really the point that we first met.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think both our paths have gone different ways, but we both still find ourselves working together as of today. And from my point of view, I never forget those people that helped me along the way at the time. So when I was first taken the commercial role, I was really responsible for an area, which was the southern area for industrial OEM business. Then as I transitioned through the company, 2004, I was appointed as the head of UK sales for all OEM business, which included automotive and industry, plus some automotive aftermarket parts. I led a team of external key account and area sales manager until 2011. 2011, NTN Corporation had gone on a staged acquisition of the French bearing maker SNR, and I moved into a specific role for NTN Europe at that time, dedicated purely to automotive business. So at that point, I became responsible still for the UK market for automotive, but also specific customers for Europe and a global function for another world-renowned OEM. I also, at this point, was continuing to support some operational managers here in the UK in support of the UK managing director. And then during 2019, the previous managing director had announced his intention to retire. So following internal discussions with the NTN Corporation President, Mr. Akubu, and other senior executives, I was offered the position to succeed the outgoing managing director. From the 30th of March of this year, I assumed full responsibility of managing director for NTN UK. This wasn't due to happen until 1st of May. However, due to the COVID crisis, it's been accelerated. So as you can probably well imagine, it's not how I envisaged the transition when I accepted the position at the end of 2019. But I'm a big believer in that what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. And I certainly have had some big challenges, but I think it will make me a stronger and an all-round more grounded person in the now and into the future. So for all of the negatives, I'm trying to take the positive, of the transition, and as I say, how I envisaged it, but we have to deal with what's in front of us.
Absolutely. And it's quite unusual these days to find somebody who's been certainly in the same company for such a long period of time and had such a great support and that sort of dedication. Nowadays, it's more like sort of 5 years and people move on, even if that long. So it's quite an incredible story and testimony to your diligence and obviously how people thought of you. So
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've had some very good mentors from an early age that I've learned from, and have had confidence in me. And to be honest, Dave, if I have the opportunity to do similar for some of our younger members in the future, to nurture them, to do that, I am very passionate about trying to do that. Clearly, people have to have certain set skills, but generally, if we can nurture people and develop people within our organisation, that's clearly a route that I would like to take. And I try and use myself as an example to some of the newer and members of the team that have come into our company, to show them that, you know, from my side, I joined as an internal salesperson, and I've transitioned through the company. I've had lots of backing, but clearly I've given something back to the company as well. So it's been a two-way way of working, should we say,
Yeah.
between me and the company.
No.
So, you know, I'm very, very proud of what I've achieved, but I still think there's more that Nick O'Neill can do for NTN into the future, for sure.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing it. So, NTN, I know NTN particularly as a leading player in the world of global bearing manufacture. And obviously, its supply chain is quite incredible and very efficient. I've experienced it firsthand. Would you be able to tell us more about NTN from a global perspective, such as its presence and markets served, then NTN UK and the products and services provided locally?
Yeah, for sure. So NTN is a really truly global corporation. In fact, we celebrated our 100 years of this great company in 2018. In essence, we're split into different regions. So we have Japan, where our headquarters for the corporation are. The Americas, which is obviously North America and South Americas. Europe, and Asia, which is inclusive of China. We have 219 locations in 33 countries, and obviously we are looking to expand. There is new markets, there is new areas. So as a forward-thinking company, we are looking, you know, for expansion. We have production in 17 countries. Sales, we have 125 locations in 33 countries. And for research and development, we're in 5 countries with 19 locations within those 5 countries. Thereafter, we split our business into really 3 business units. We're across all markets, but the 3 primary business units are automotive, industry, and then we have aftermarket. So if I consider automotive, that's obviously passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, off-road, motorcycle. Industry is including, but not limited to, but construction, railway, aerospace, wind, agriculture. And then for distribution, we are obviously both in automotive and industrial distribution. So really we split into three business units. And all of these markets are served by all of the regions I mentioned. So obviously Japan, Americas, Europe, and Asia. We're supplying and supporting all of these markets. In terms of wheel bearing for passenger vehicles, NTN is the #1 market leader, has the #1 market share, and we also do other core product apart from bearing, which is constant velocity joints, or some of the listeners might know that as half shafts.
Right.
And we are #2 market share for this. And again, if we consider NTN UK specifically, we are active within all markets I mentioned, so automotive, industry, and obviously the aftermarket. And we supply a vast array of product, from very small deep groove ball bearings for, say, electric motor applications, to very big spherical roller bearings for construction or for wind. And again, we have many different makeup of bearing type. And also We are also using imperial and metric design bearings. So again, we have a vast range, which makes NTN clearly a market leader in bearing technology.
Right, right. Might be a challenging one to answer given your history, but being a Japanese-owned company, I'm extremely interested to understand more about the differences in the structure, the management styles, perhaps behaviours and culture of NTN when compared to a traditional British company. Are you able to talk us through that at all? What are the strengths of the Japanese approach?
Honestly speaking, I guess this question is fairly difficult for me to answer, having been with a Japanese corporate for more than 30 years now. So it's difficult from a benchmark, for comparison. But one thing I can clearly see is I've seen changes and evolvement as NTN has become truly a global organisation. And maybe a little bit of the conservatism that we seen 30 years ago is sort of not there as much as it was previously. And the behaviour for all NTN companies remains one of solidarity and of a collective spirit. I've been very fortunate to travel to various regions, various NTN companies within the global roadmap that we have. And one thing that always shines through to me is the NTN DNA within each company. So say we all clearly have the same structure and belief, and one of solidarity, as I said. So unfortunately, I can't really give you a comparison between a British structured company and Japanese owned one, because I've been with this company for 30 plus years. But I have clearly seen a change in the behavioural way of we do things.
Right. That's quite reassuring, though, isn't it? That you can almost go to any NTN and almost like breathe the brand. Much like you can go to any McDonald's and you'll be served the same kind of stuff. It's consistent.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this is applied to particularly for all our production facilities. The way that we might be slightly different machinery, but the processes and everything, are intrinsically the same through all of the operations.
Yeah. And that's something, obviously, the Japanese are highly respected for. It's their focus on quality and continual improvement. Perhaps you can talk us through then the techniques and metrics used in both the manufacturing operations and the office processes that ensure and drive continuous improvement throughout the company.
Yeah, for sure. So NTN adopts what we know within our organisation as monozukuri, which is really meaning the production or making, and it's a Japanese term for manufacturing. And it's really encompassing their prowess, know-how and spirit of the Japanese manufacturing practices. Clearly, customer satisfaction is our top priority. We aim to further improve this with QCD, quality, cost and delivery. Mm-hmm. And all the way through the manufacturing capabilities, we try and use what they call in Japanese Kanzan Saisen activity, which is really meaning perfect production in the Japanese world. And again, the aim of this is building global production systems, which I alluded to in the previous comments, that by each local site, we try and adapt the same principles, production systems across all of the NTN sites globally. We continue to meet with our customers, and under the production system, we try and optimize the overall supply chain experience and management, which goes from production into the logistics between the supplier and the client. We also recognise, the importance of risk management and compliance at all times. Compliance for us is of the utmost importance. We have good internal control policies. Management is established in each company to oversee and monitor the operations, and they each have an internal control and audit section within it. Again, the internal control section works with the audit departments and our CSR, corporate social responsibility headquarters, to implement these specific policies to all of the local regions, i.e., again, Japan, the Americas, Europe, Asia, and again, respectful of local needs and characteristics and culture.
So basically, in every NTN facility, it's almost like a translation, would I say, of the systems, procedures, policies, the documentation. So it's all replicated time and time again in a consistent manner.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how we are organised sort of globally.
Yeah. So see, you get the assurance and the quality.
Yeah. Yeah. We are confident that you could go to any NTN production facility and you will get exactly the same out from any of the facilities.
Right. Okay. That's good. Just thinking about the bearings a little bit, for those people perhaps who are not involved in engineering, there's a few different bearing types you touched upon earlier on. Could you say a few little words about them just to explain a little bit more to these, perhaps the non-engineering listeners?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we manufacture predominantly rolling element bearings. So they both, they have rings and balls, cages, or rollers. They're usually held in place, obviously, by a cage. They can have different greases in. Some won't have greases, but in general, ball bearings are used for lighter loads and high speeds applications like electric motors, as I mentioned before, machine tools, so your classic power tools. Roller bearing designs are more for the heavily loaded applications like gearboxes, in construction equipment. And we also make bespoke bearings dedicated to only one customer and or one application, such as really these are more biased towards the automotive OEM and or the aeronautics divisions. So I think, again, if I just take it from memory, NTN, I think they produce 800 million bearings, something like this.
That's
so
incredible,
it's
isn't it?
real numbers, and as I say, things are changing clearly with the different parameters globally of expectations for environment and everything. But we really, in essence, we are a bearing company. But as I said on one of my earlier points, we also have another core product, which is the half shaft.
Yeah.
But it's in terms of bearings, really ball and roller bearings is our bread and butter, if you were.
So choosing the right bearing for an application is quite a critical function then. That gives you the long-term reliability to an OEM of their product. Your bearings, for example, I know are used in many vehicles, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier. Are you able to give us an overview of the steps taken to determine what is the right type of bearing for your application? What information do you need to know, and what do you do with it when you receive it from your customers?
Yeah. So as I gave you a history of how I've evolved with an NTN, obviously we have a team of application engineers, which I was one in the 90s. And really the role of the application engineer is to advise on the correct type and size of bearing, either from our standard stroke catalog ranges. We can also then design the bearing specifically to suit a particular application, such as, for passenger vehicles or light commercial vehicles or aerospace. It's really important that to validate the suitability of the parts, not only by the calculation, but also by bench and field testing. So again, when we're working with our clients and particularly their engineering departments, we need a whole suite of information. So in simple terms, we need to know what the loads are, what the expectation is, is there going to be harsh environments? So again, that would define what sort of bearing we recommended, whether it has to be a sealed for life bearing, what sorts of greases would be needed because of the temperatures the bearing could be seeing. Do we have to use any special materials because it's seeing shock loads, for instance, or the ambient temperatures are, seeing highs and low values. For instance, on a wheel bearing, it could be in the desert at very high temperatures, but it could be in Siberia with very low temperatures. So we have to see, which marketplaces that the applications are working in. So we have to cover a whole range, a whole suite of factors. I mean, for me, this is from my engineering side, is that people sometimes see bearing as a commodity, but it really is a precision instrument and needs to be respected for sure.
Yeah, obviously maintained. And I guess because you've just emphasized the extremes of the application, certainly about the vehicle, you just mentioned Siberia to the Sahara. Product warranties, I guess, are a factor people are interested in. So what kind of warranties do NTN offer for their product? And do you know how they compare with other manufacturers?
Yeah, so our standard range for products are typically 12 months warranty, covering our design and manufacturing integrity. Where we design a bespoke bearing solution supported by a validation program, we can also warrant the performance in service. Duration really is dependent on the negotiation really between ourselves and the client and the market segment, and sometimes there's already commercial agreements in place. So for example, somebody's expectation may be that a particular bearing needs to do 1 million kilometers as part of the warranty. Again, once we've had road load datas and duty cycles, then we can make more of a judgment of where we see that. But typically, and I would say that our competitors are offering the same in terms of general warranty of 12 months. But based upon, as I say, the bespoke solution, it would be case by case, and our competitor may do something different to what we do. I know for certain that we've had instances where we've warranted bearings for, as I say, 1 million kilometers or 7 years in service based upon different criteria. So there's no hard and fast rule. We would say, as for catalogue items, it would typically be a 12-month warranty.
Yeah. I guess obviously it's a key factor is how the customer maintains and looks after the product as well. So if it's just left to rot, so to speak, then obviously it's not going to be quite as its longevity perhaps won't be there as much. So certainly I've known from the bearings I've seen that NTN have had in application, very, very rare do I ever see a bearing failure. And that's testimony, I believe, to the quality and the preciseness that you manufacture the bearings to. So it's quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd be lying if I say we don't see bearing failures, but most of the time it's not due to the bearing. It's probably due to poor fitting or poor treatment. I'll go back to one of the earlier points. It's a precision item, so it has to have be respected. Even sometimes if we are transporting bearings long distances, it can be the way that they are packaged, even in the transport, in the logistics company, if there's lots of shock and everything like that. So they really have to be respected.
Yeah. So in the instance, let's say, where there appears to be a sort of general wear and tear, and that's absolutely fine, but there's a failure, how do NTN go about trying to understand what caused the failure, and how do they report on the matter to try and establish the resolution to that kind of problem?
Yeah. Okay. So again, we support any investigation and return from our customer. We have full in-house measurement and analysis facilities to support the investigation. Again, really dependent on the investigation. Depends whether we can do it locally here, i.e. in NTN UK, or whether we send it back to one of our R&D and production facilities. Again, this can vary from simple dimensional confirmation, which we can do in-house here in the UK, but up to techniques such as X-ray diffraction. Clearly, we haven't got that facility here, so it goes back to plant and to R&D. But a lot of the failure analysis we can see through visual inspection once we've disassembled the actual bearing. So when we see the components, we can look at the inner rings, we can look at the balls or the rollers, we can look at some of the grease. So then we get an understanding of the operating conditions, whether it's been run too hot, so we can see that through the discoloration in the rings, should we say. So we do have a lot of expertise here in-house, and we have a fault tree analysis where we can look and we can pretty quickly get a good idea of what the failure route could be. Could it be mishandling? Could it be faulty fitting? But we, as I say, we have a whole host of different ways, from very simple visual inspection to going through to X-ray.
Right, quite comprehensive then. So
Yeah.
you really are able to drill down into the, almost doing a forensic analysis of the part, trying to determine what was the root cause of the failure then, and
Yeah.
help to overcome it. Yeah.
But as I
Fantastic.
say, when we first see a bearing come back from the field, 90% of the times we could have a very good idea, even before if we, in the event we have to send it off to the R&D or the production facilities.
Yeah, it's great. And then when you come to a new bearing, obviously you've got a new application. Obviously the customer is looking for that confidence that the bearing's going to do what it should do for as long as it needs to do. You must have some pretty amazing evaluation and test facilities. Are you able to tell us a few words about that area?
Yeah, for sure. So we have simulation software, so where we can do all of the design, the FEAs, the FMEAs, and all of this software available to us. Initially, we do the design by calculation analysis. So as I said earlier, we'll engage with the client, and we'll ask him to provide us basically a set of data that will be telling us what loads he's expecting to see, what conditions it's working in terms of ambient temperatures, working temperatures. Is it working in a certain temperature but only for a small amount of time? Is it doing it constantly? And we take all this and we will do our design calculation analysis. Once we have this, we would make a proposal to the customer. We go into more meaningful and deeper analysis collectively. We'll run some simulation software. Then after, if it's, both parties are happy with where we're at, the next phase really is to make prototypes for validation, and that again is either in-house bench testing or by customer field testing. To be honest, it's usually a mixture of both.
Yeah.
Because they'll obviously want to test it, and we'll also want to test it because, again, going back to the warranty side of things, we want to know that we are looking after potential issues from that. So we go down the prototype route. Then after the successful testing of the prototype, we will then move into the production phase for validation. And again, these will be bench tested to make sure really they're consistent with the hard prototypes we had supplied previously.
Yeah.
Generally, this process can take months. It can take a number of years. Again, with some of my experience, I have seen clearly a shortening in getting things to market, whereas before maybe we'd have between 3 to 5 years. Nowadays, I think you're lucky if you get up to a maximum of 3 years. So,
Right. Yeah.
But again, it's the world that we're living in today. Things are evolving, and we have to be flexible to to continue with this
Fast pace. Yeah. You've got to be ahead of the market. Yeah. Which just brings us on to an interesting thought about bearing technology and where you see it developing in the next 20 years. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So again, we're always challenged, to make the improvements. There's a constant focus for reduction in noise, for instance, friction and pollution to meet always these environmental changes that we see in legislation. We see more demand now for sealed for life or service-free solutions, and more integration of bearing designs with the surrounding components. So both mechanical and electrical systems, we term these mechatronic solutions. But regarding, which is a hot topic now, CO2 and everything, the demand for reduction in CO2, we are heavily working on solutions to reduce friction And to be honest, I see this as the technology and the trend in the next 20 years,
Okay.
to package those more efficient and smaller.
Yeah, all about efficiency and less impact on the environment and saving fuel. I guess obviously bearings will have an impact on the efficiency of the vehicle, for example.
Yeah. We are challenged very heavily on this item by our OEMs, because obviously they're having to meet government legislations, and the penalties for them if they don't meet this are very, very high.
Yeah. So if we moved on to some customer facing aspects now, obviously dealing directly with NTN, I'm sure the annual customer spend on bearings for their OEM products or distribution network is a key factor. Well, but what other things are seen to be important when selecting customers for NTN to directly engage with? And does NTN have a policy on the size and type of customer that they'll work with directly? And if so, what are these thresholds and considerations before you advise them on the correct channel to follow? I mean, the sales channel.
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to the 4 different regions, the structures would be different, and it is really determined by region. So, for example, here in NTN UK, we'd look at the type of customer. We would apportion it into the various, like the 3 business units I spoke about. So, would it be OEM, i.e., automotive or industry? Would it be a distributor, automotive or industrial? And then we have the MRO, classical type of customer.
Right. Yeah.
So we would look at the stability of a customer for sure. We do extensive credit scoring on that customer. We want to make sure that, I'll be honest, that we're going to get paid at the end of the day for providing the service and the products. Clearly, we have to do that, and we have to be more sure than ever now with the difficulties surrounding the COVID and everything that we are working collectively with good potential customers. Then we'll always make sure that we visit that customer face to face, because we want to qualify in our own minds that what we're talking about is actually the reality. We'd also then consider the current route to market. So is the potential client already working with a competitor or a local distributor? The size, obviously, of the potential. Is it geared up to be more locally supplied by a local distributor? Because sometimes if they have a smaller spend, they want to not just get bearings from that distributor, they want to get all their PPE, all of their other engineering ancillaries. So again, we'd look at all of that, and clearly the resource required to support that. Once all that criteria is established, we move forward with our decision and whether to really fundamentally handle the business directly here at NTN UK, or whether it's more beneficial to work in partnership with one of our official distributors. Right. And again, it can be a little bit different by region, because some of the other regions, they would have what they would class as super distributors. So they won't deal with some of the small to medium OEMs. It's all done via a distributor. But as I say, in the UK, the market is a little different. So we have our own sort of set parameters for us to set where we're going to move the business forwards.
Right. Okay. So what would you say is the strategy and process by which NTN ensures they then retain the customers that they've chosen to deal with directly, not just for the short term, but also for the long term?
Yeah. So NTN is obviously a manufacturing production company. But again, we've recognised the value to support the customer. We want to add value and the experience for our client. So we are really transforming now from what we would say the classic manufacturing company into a company that delivers value for our clients through its products and services. So again, like in the production reform, we promote and we streamline the productions. I mentioned this word earlier, monozukuri.
Yeah.
And we use these practices with the customer closely in mind. We're always looking for efficiencies and utilization of like robots and the artificial intelligence and this new way that we call the Internet of Things through the supply chain. We want to have more collaboration with our clients, and therefore we see that we can really deliver higher value and added value to our clients. And that's really where I see that we are making huge leap forwards. We are transform, as I say, from this manufacturing company into a company that's delivering the added value to the customers.
Right. Okay. You've got quite a range of customers, you say, from high volume manufacturing OEMs like the car manufacturers to other smaller companies, shall we say, with the volume isn't quite so expansive. But I'm curious to know what you see as the most noticeable differences between the customer's approach. So thinking from the two aspects, let's say, of the engineering perspective, how does that difference between the two types of customer come out? And from a buying perspective as well, you got very different buying approaches, I guess, from a high volume guy to somebody who's dealing with perhaps the lower end of the market in terms of volume. Be interested to know what you think about that. How do they differ?
Yeah. So again, you make a very good point. You know, we have some customers that are very high in terms of what they are spending. Again, some are very high in what they are using in terms of resource. But if I consider automotive OEM customers, generally they can be split by departments of chassis, body and white, powertrain. And again, that's thereafter broken down further into teams of what we would call core and advanced from an engineering point of view. Advanced is always looking for the next step in terms of trend, whereas core is working more on the today, the now. But one thing I think is clear, there's no defined rule by company or by business sector. Some industrial customers, for example, will consider it by project, others by commodity. But one thing that I will clearly stress, and one thing I would personally guarantee, is that NTN will always remain flexible to adjust our working methods to support our current clients, both existing and potential clients. Thereafter, in terms of engineering, it can a lot of the time come down to budgets. So what budgets would some of the OEMs have for, you know, ED&T, engineering, design and testing? Mm-hmm. There would also be tooling budgets by the respective clients. Again, this is implying additional cost if there's a bespoke item that, you know, is the solution. It's not a catalogue item. So if anything is bespoke, clearly there would be need for additional tooling. So these are sometimes considered the bearing as a commodity. From my point of view, the commodity is something that, you know, we need to differentiate to what is considered the commodity product for the client. So one of the biggest noticeable differences from my side with regards to purchasing is between the different industries, automotive and industry. For example, in automotive, the purchasing is typically differentiated between strategic and delivered. Strategic purchasing is looking at the future sourcing, so working more with the advanced engineering team, whereas the delivered is doing more of the day-to-day operations. Generally, the responsible persons are different between strategy and delivered.
Yeah.
And we in essence only have responsibility for a handful of components. From my perspective, there really is no hard or fast rules. It comes down to how the client is operational, how his resources are. And as I mentioned, we can see some buyers having a small amount of product with huge budgets, and the opposite can also be seen in that there are smaller budgets, but with many different product responsibilities. So I think, again, it's really case by case. I think sometimes it can really dependent on what resources are available by the client, how fast they want to come to market. But again, from my point of view, we are seeing this evolving all of the time. So what's on trend today from the way that they are organised from engineering and purchasing, it could may well change and transition within 12 months.
Okay. Okay. I'm interested to know then about good practices and what you like to see all buyers apply. Firstly, in the commencement of a relationship with NTN, and then when the relationship has been established. So, what do you say are good practices that are fostering good relationships with NTN?
That's an interesting question, that is, for me. So for me, uh, I really believe that the buyers stroke purchasing people really have to consider the total delivered cost. We refer that to TCD, and not price alone, to consider the added value that I mentioned earlier. I still believe fundamentally that people do like to buy from people, competitively, of course.
Yeah.
But for me, it's all about the transparency, the integrity, and developing trust collectively, because this leads to partnerships. And for me, that is way more beneficial for both the supplier and the client, and does get away from the classic supplier client relationship. So for me, I'll go back for the intrinsically for me, it's the transparency and honesty to cement partnerships. And thereafter, once that relationship is established, it should never breed any forms of complacency. We should remain with regular dialogue. Okay, maybe it's not always conducive for this to be face to face. Again, if I go back to the current situation we see with COVID, I think we've seen what powerful media, the tools such as Zoom and Teams are, for example. The balance needs to be right between virtual and face-to-face meetings, from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's important that all discussions should be followed up by a summary of minutes of the key points, really to avoid any misunderstandings. And again, going back to an earlier point when we was talking about the splits between engineering and purchasing, and way purchasing departments are evolving. You might be working on a project that in 1 year's time, the original buyer you was with has moved on within the company, is doing a different project. So I think it's important to have the summary of minutes that we can always, for both parties, to go back to and understand, to be able to walk it through.
Yeah, I think certainly I would fundamentally agree with that. Documenting what's been agreed and understood, find is critical. It's so easy to have a meeting, have a great discussion, walk away, and then 2 months later or longer, think, now what was it we agreed on this, and who was going to do that, and when were they going to do it? I've
Yeah,
seen it a number of times that that area fall apart because one person's understanding is very different to the others.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's critical. I'm a big believer, and I say to some of my team that I always like to see things walk through. So we started at this point and we've walked through to this point. What's happened in between? So we want to document it, because for me, it's trying to make the process as simple and as transparent as possible.
Yeah, yeah. As you rightly say, I would usually send out minutes of the meeting to the people present. My first tack is anybody that's in my company. Then I'll say, okay, guys, this is what I'm about to send to the supplier. Is your interpretation of this correct? I then send it to the supplier and ask for them to feedback and confirm that their understanding is in alignment. And then there's hopefully very little room for confusion.
Yeah, yeah. I find this works best for sure. And this
Yeah.
is the way I like to work.
Okay, brilliant. So, in your experience, where and how can relationships with customers deteriorate? And how does NTN ensure this is, as best as possible, avoided?
Yeah. So really, I think it's difficult. So we should never look for blaming just one particular party. I think sometimes it's a collective of lack of vision and coordination by, as I say, both the supplier and the client. And usually I find that it's a failure to keep all of the key stakeholders and departments in the loop across all of the functions. So classically, you and I could be having a discussion today, but it could be affecting another department. So we have to ensure that we keep everybody as I say, all of the key stakeholders within the loop of what's going on. To support this within our own organisation, we have like what we call a one face to the customer strategy in terms of commercial, quality and engineering support. So one person is responsible for the commercial discussion, one for the quality and one for the engineering. And again, this is all supported by a back office and the higher management. We found that this has really worked well. It builds trust, it builds confidence in the relationship. But being realistic, we don't live in the land of utopia. So we all have issues to resolve collectively and together. And as I said earlier, without a blame culture, I think we should all learn lessons on how to continuously improve together. Because ultimately, if our client is successful, then we will be successful because you are selling more of the product. So it's a win-win. I'm a big believer in you resolve a problem or you become part of the problem. So it's how to resolve that problem.
That's a good statement.
Yeah, that's something I passionately believe in that. Again, as I've transitioned through NTN, one of my previous mentors, this is going back to the early 2000s, this one thing that always stuck with me, he always said, if you have a problem, you solve that problem or you become part of that problem. And that's always stuck with me. And I think it was great advice.
Yeah, very wise words. Absolutely correct. Yeah. So if we can move just for a short period of time about production and supply chain. We've now obviously established the customer relationships. You able to give us an overview of how NTN plan production to maintain stocks and supply? What information do you need to know and when from your customers?
Yeah, for sure. So at NTN, we produce a business plan, which includes sales and purchase plan forecast, varying levels of detail. So we have high level and obviously we go much more into the deeper detail. The NTN manufacturing facilities provided with the overall requirements so they can allocate resources and they can plan the production, because it's not just about, going into the production planning. We have to look at all the individual parts, the individual component parts, so we can allocate the production slots to work with our sub-suppliers to order, the correct levels of raw material. We don't want to underestimate that, because then we have we can create some problems in terms of being efficient with the production. Equally, we don't want to overestimate the raw material because it's tying up cash and can affect cash flows, etc. This is why we have several levels of detail. And again, from working with the client, we would like to obviously have a firm order to an agreed delivery date before we issue anything to our production department. But that's best laid plans. It's not always possible. So the next best thing that we would do, we rigorously maintain the schedule of the requirements on part by part basis. Lead times, again, can be dependent on the parts required, what type of bearing it is, because all of our bearing manufacturers manufacture a wide range of parts on a small number of lines. Again, dependent on the volume, parts are manufactured in different cycles. So for high volume OEM, for instance, we can manufacture weekly or daily. Really depends on the on the volume.
Yeah.
Thereafter, for medium volume OEMs, we would put this on a cyclic program, so maybe every other month or every third or fourth month. Okay, so this would be for medium volume OEM requirements, large bearings on some semi-special bearings, we would say, and then for extra for the real bespoke specials or very, very large bearings, 2 meters in diameter would be
2 meters. My God.
Yeah. Would be once or twice a year. But again, as long as we have regular communication to ensure that the information is quantifiable and is qualified, and we are working collectively and accurately, we can, make some step changes along the way. So really, in summary, for the high volume production, that's weekly stroke monthly production. For the medium volume, it's cyclic, every 2 to 3 months. And for the specials and very large, it's once to twice per year.
Yeah. So you mentioned cash flow, and obviously you've got a huge range of both customers and products. So stock levels, that must be quite a challenge for you guys. And I guess where those stocks are quite important as well. The sort of mix by continent or region, and as you mentioned, the different arms of NTN. Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, NTN has in excess of 20,000 employees. I mentioned the 219 locations earlier. So NTN Group, it strives to offer better products and services, while engaging with R&D, manufacturing, technical support. Again, we have regional brands as well, which you could say. So in Europe, as I said earlier, we acquired S&R in 2007/8, but 100% ownership from 2010. They've integrated now into the NTN Corporation. We have a global network, and again, the size and complexity, it's difficult to give just a simple answer. Really, apart from NTN holds stock appropriate to the business environment in each of the operating regions, which I spoke about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's quite difficult to know at all times where and when everything should be held and in what what place around the world. So you must have quite an amazing distribution network, and that must connect obviously globally your customers with stocks. So if you have for whatever reason, a shortfall in one location, you must be able to transfer product around the world very seamlessly and well organized.
Yeah. So again, NTN, we operate a logistics operation in conjunction with obviously the world leading global logistics companies. Again, I won't name the names, but I think we'll all be familiar who the large logistics companies are.
Yeah.
This ensures efficient movement of all our products around the globe. This is again supported by NTN's in-house global inventory system and worldwide inventory utilization system, which is based upon various software, which is enabling each NTN location to see the global stock, so we can see it in other regions, we can see it in other warehouses, we can see it in other production facilities. And as NTN manufacturers in 33 different countries, and a lot of that manufacturing can be tailored towards the need of each specific region. This really does make us very responsive to customer demands, that we have the opportunity to tap into these 33 manufacturing countries, to see what's available. Clearly, for us, it's again going back to an earlier point. We want to engage well with the client, so we can hopefully not have to tap into some of the global inventory, because that's implying additional costs if we have to air freight something, for instance, very quickly.
Yeah.
But again, we don't live in the land of utopia that we have to sometimes do it. But we do, as I say, we are very fortunate to have that fallback position of being part of a huge global operation.
Yeah, I guess the integration of those systems is absolutely critical to give you that visibility all around the world for each product is a tremendous asset. Yeah, absolutely. So tracking quality and delivery, obviously that's pretty important to your customers, and certainly a key measure that I come across regularly is important to me is delivery on time in full. In other words, you've ordered X amount of bearings and you delivered the full amount, the right time at the right place. So how do you guys go about measuring those things, and how are you performing?
Yeah. So quality and delivery performance are controlled as part of our NTN quality management system. Here in NTN UK, we hold the BSI certificates, ISO 9001, 2000. We're proactively, for the rest of the NTN family, acquiring the international standards for quality management systems, both overseas production sites, as well as this IATF 16949. IATF is International Automotive Task Force certification. And obviously a lot of the vehicle manufacturers, OEMs now are demanding this as a certification. It's basically an additional standard for the automobile industry. Again, as we transition, we're expanding. So during our last financial year, we qualified 3 new sites with certification. So again, from a production side of things, we are in development. We consolidate with the various subsidiaries to make sure that they have the proper certification, as well as they are respecting the NTN quality management system. We also have other quality standards globally, which is for the Japanese standards, the JIS, and NADCAP, which is standards for aerospace. Again, we have specific ones for railway, so it's IRIS here in Europe, the specific ones for China. And again, NTN are adapting and adopted these in all of the quality management systems. Going back to the point about an acceptable delivery on time, reality is NTN only considers that delivery on time in full should be acceptable position. But again, to achieve this, we need to work in the right spirit and collaboration with our client. And again, back to one of the previous points, we want to have a firm order at an agreed delivery date, being able to maintain the schedules on a part by part basis. That really gives us the best opportunity to, meet delivery on time. So again, in summary, the only acceptable position for us is to consider delivery on time in full.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We all know how challenging forecasting can be, for sure. And obviously that may mean there's an unforeseen rise in demand. Let's just say a crazy example, these kids' fidget spinners, they're all got lots of bearings in them, haven't they, basically? Yep. And there's a huge popularity of this product, unforeseen completely. It was a wonderful experience to have. And I guess the bearing manufacturer therefore needs to be able to sort of pivot and fast track additional manufacture when it's needed. How does NTN go about doing that?
It depends on the nature of the product involved. We'll use general principles really to mitigate any reasonable changes. So again, here in the NTN UK, we'll have on-site backup stock to allow us certain flexibilities in customer demand. Typically, because the product is coming in from Japan, we're aiming for 6 to 8 weeks for an agreed stock level, which profiles the client's product-specific stock for the UK. Again, another point we can consider, as I mentioned, is that we can utilise the global stocks if they are available. We could then also request production planning for some priority manufacturing, if that's possible, because again, for that, the machinery could be available to produce. However, we have to make sure that we can get the raw material from our subcontractors. Yeah. So it's it's not just a case of machinery being available. We have to look at the wider supply chain. And again, the other one, sometimes we can get a concession if an alternative part could be appropriate.
Okay. Yeah. Now, there's been some difficult times, obviously, historically. I'm thinking of business continuity and resilience. And obviously, we had that terrible situation in Fukushima when we had the nuclear disaster. And there must have been obviously a very difficult time, but out of that, I'm sure NTN has learnt from that and has taken some pretty amazing measures to make sure the business is stable and resilient and can supply. What would you say were some critical learnings from that very difficult time?
Yeah. So first thing is that NTN has no manufacturing facilities in the area affected by the disaster, or within around 80 kilometers of the Fukushima nuclear plant. Again, in line with the local government, and that the risk of radiation was not a huge concern for NTN, because the Customs and Border Protection Services They employed several types of detection for radiation in both the air and its seaports, and were using specific operational protocols, to make sure that things were safe, were safe. So we was not affected from that. But it's not only the nuclear disaster at Fukushima that's had devastating effects. In Japan, we've had the earthquakes and tsunamis of recent times.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to say that NTN has not been affected either operationally or, by the employees. So we are fortunate that, but we know that Japan, because of where it's located, can be open to some of these disasters. In fact, I can remember the first time I visited Japan. I think the first thing that I actually done was earthquake training. So,
Really? My God.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. That was the back of the 90s. So people are aware, but again, I think that within NTN's higher management, clearly that's something that is considered when they are looking regarding future plans for the company.
Yeah.
And again, NTN plants and shipping ports are in the southern part of Japan, so fairly far away from the affected areas of Fukushima. But again, one thing that I did see, again, go back to what I said before, NTN spirit and solidarity, is that when we had these terrible tragedies in Japan, whilst NTN and its employees were not directly affected, we was contributing to relief efforts in the affected areas, both locally in Japan, but also, as far as the UK, where we was trying to support and making sponsorships and donations. So really part of a wider NTN family.
Yeah. No, it's very, 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 very interesting. It's quite amazing how NTN obviously responded then. It's very good. One last question before you want to pop the kettle on and have a cup of tea. That's okay with you.
Cold beer, I think.
A cold beer. Oh, fantastic. I'll wait till Friday night for mine. Just thinking now about one last subject that is on the tip of a lot of people's tongue. It's very much in the press, is the environmental impacts of whatever we do, both ourselves and that of our customers. And obviously, as I said, the environment, energy efficiency, and carbon footprint are very much at the forefront of people's minds. Can you explain what NTN is doing to support and contribute to the reduction in those areas and the impact of their operations in those areas?
Yeah, so NTN, we inform all NTN group employees we have our own NTN environmental policy. And this is obviously to raise, as you say, a very critical and good point regarding environmental awareness. So this policy that we have has been created by the group to contribute to the sustainable development of society. We have an environmental management system that again promotes environmental protection, as well as looking at things such as energy and resource saving. Our group will help prevent global warming by developing and releasing new technologies and products that help save and create energy worldwide. We are complying with all of the applicable environmental laws and regs, and we are proactively addressing all the concerns expressed by our customers. NTN, we really are adhering to what we call the 3 R's approach, which is reduce, reuse, and recycle, as we are working on reducing waste and resource inputs such as water, raw material, and all the other resources. We are also practicing, I'm pleased to say, green procurement. So we are managing environmentally hazardous substances used in products and the different manufacturing processes. And we work to replace the very hazardous substances with alternatives. We are protecting biodiversity. We are active in forest preservations globally and other protection projects in partnership with the local communities. NTN also has its own NTN, what we call NTN Green Power Station, which is a device utilising two forms of natural energy, wind and solar light, to generate electric.
Wow.
Yeah, LED lights are installed on the unit automatically, and they turn on at night using power it's generated during the day. It virtually makes no noise. Can be installed in various areas of local communities. We've seen a lot of these shooting up in Japan, as you could well imagine, being a Japanese corporation. But the built-in battery provides power and illumination for 5 days when fully charged. And it features independent power supply. And again, with what we said a little bit earlier about the awful situation in Fukushima and the tsunamis, these sort of power can be used as an emergency power supply during these disasters or power outages, giving up to 5 days full illumination when fully charged.
Right, that's quite tremendous. 5 days. That's extremely useful. I can see a lot of opportunities there. It's fantastic. Well, Nick, I know I've taken up a tremendous amount of your time. I really do appreciate your help and support with this, and I hope that our listeners appreciate the enlightened words you've come out with and the fantastic things that NTN are doing. If a listener would like to learn more about and make contact with NTN UK, what would you recommend are the best methods?
Yeah, so we have different media. If they just wanted to have a look at a general website, the global website is the best one, which you can find at www.ntnglobal.com. For specific NTN UK, main switchboard would be the best route, which is 01543 445 000. And then we have a generic email address for the UK, which would be UK-DIST, D-I-S-T, sales at ntn-europe.com. So those are the best medias to make the initial contact with us.
Yeah.
And we would be very happy to answer any questions and look, to support anything that comes from the podcast.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. I really do thank you again for your time. It's been a long one, and you certainly deserve that beer, so I say.
No, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity, Dave, and I hope the listeners find it as enlightening and engaging as as we discussed today.
Yep, fantastic. So everybody, I hope you've really enjoyed this podcast. Obviously, you'll now be able to go out and prepare your next bearing selection with any luck. Anyway, I hope you have a good time, whatever you're doing. And as I always remind my listeners, remember, save money and buy smart. Goodbye.